Hey gang, happy Wednesday, hump day. Thanks for joining me. And man, we got a great show put together, man. We got some cool things we're going to talk about. The number one mental problem athletes face, right? And I hope that piques your interest because, man, does it pique mine. In this broadcast, I'm going to share with you the number one mental problem that athletes face. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why they have this problem, okay? Which is, I'm real more intrigued about the why than anything, and then how it destroys their performances. And when we finish the broadcast today, you're going to walk away with some nuggets, and those are going to be 3 solutions that you're going to be able to implement to avoid these pitfalls, right? So if you've never met me before, I'm Sean Humphreys. I'm a high performance coach. I specialize in changing the performance of individuals and athletes. Whether you're a highly skilled athlete or you're on your way to being one, or you just want to improve your performance, you're in the right place. So, hey, if you don't mind, give me a little thumbs up so that you can hear me. Throw a little wow face at me. Also, tag someone and invite them in to check out this broadcast this evening because, man, you're watching some cool stuff, and we want to help as many people as we possibly can. So also let me know where you're watching this from. I'm really intrigued where people tune in from around the country or even around the world. And I'll also catch you on the rebroadcast. So with your questions and your comments, I love those because it really helps me dig in a little bit more and not really get off topic, but take the topic even a little bit deeper into experiences that I have with EPS, with coaching in the college space, or even professional sports in Major League Baseball, or even with the New Orleans Saints. And also, we're live on YouTube tonight at on my channel at Sean Humphreys. So let's dig into this, huh? So let's talk about the number one problem, right? So I get this. So I got a problem, right? And I know it's mental. Right? And it must be because I hit every shot in practice really well. And when I get into competition, I miss hit shots, I miss easy putts, and I just don't have a clue why. And I really don't know what to do. And I can't stand beating myself in competition. And what am I doing wrong? And how do I fix it? Does this sound familiar? I mean, every week I have conversations with parents and athletes, and they mention to me that their son or daughter is taking lessons every week from the best instructor in the area. They've got the best clubs, they've got the best training facilities, and they hear, man, their golf swing looks great, they can hit every shot, and when they get into competition, it crumbles, right? Does this sound familiar? I mean, these are conversations that I have on a regular basis with parents day in and day out. So why is it the player has issues and is so frustrated, okay? When they're doing all the right things, or are they really doing all the right things? I mean, they could be a victim of what I believe, which is, the number one mental problem among competitors, which is it's overtrying. And we do it and we don't even know that we do it. And when I began competing, I believed that you do your best at a sport and you should give 110%. I mean, that's kind of always what we were taught. And that's what I always heard. And I've done it in other sports, even in basketball, which is one of my, if you've hung around me, you know that I absolutely love basketball. And I worked as hard as I could. I would shoot until late hours at night. I would run the sprints as fast as I could. I would train as hard as I could, multiple times a day, and doing practices, almost 2 days, throughout the season. And I accepted the fact to try hard was to do well. I mean, that was really kind of the understood mission was that, so I accepted the fact that to try hard was to do well, and if I gave any sport less than that, I deserved to lose. I don't know if that's the right recipe. Now trying your hardest may be the best thing, in running track, or maybe even weightlifting, or maybe even a 100-yard dash. However, there's many activities that don't work so well when you give 110%. From my experiences and observations, not only as an athlete, but as a teacher and a coach and a trainer, to me, all things in life, require a certain amount of mental effort to do them well. All of them do. Think about that again. All the things that we do in life require a certain amount of mental effort to do them well. Would you agree? Hey, also, when I ask these questions, man, I would love to hear from you. Give me your inputs. Jot down a couple notes. Hit me with them, and man, I'd love to field those. So, but if we give less than, let's say, 1% less effort than what's required, or 1% more than is needed, it's fair to say that performance will drop either way. But the key is, as well as I do, is the key is to find the proper level of mental mindset for every task, right? And there are some sports that tend to require a lot of power, right? The greatest power used and gives you the greatest chance of winning. And these high-powered sports require certain muscle groups and to be tense to the maximum. But that's not always the case that we have to do that. What's interesting is that very much like the defensive lines, and I'm very fortunate that I get to work with the New Orleans Saints, and I've spent time with Ryan Nielsen, who's the defensive line coach for the Saints. And I'll tell you what, these athletes, they're strong, okay? And they're extremely quick, all right? But they're fast, they're quick, and these linemen have extremely fast hands and sound technique. And the reason they have that is because being a defensive lineman, it's like martial arts, okay? But in many cases, and they have to be able to counter moves that the offensive line goes. So just hang with me here. This is where I'm going at with this. So in many instances, they overpower their opponent, not by strength, but with quick counter moves that allows them to create leverage against their opponent, okay? As opposed to saying, hey, I've got to tense up and I've got to do this with all kinds of strength. To be a defensive lineman now, today, and even in college and the NFL, this requires sharp and fast techniques, and you've got to outsmart the linemen, not so much to outpower them. The D-line experience a greater chance of overpowering the opponent when they're trying to move the person. Let me rephrase that. The defensive lineman doesn't have a good chance of when they're actually physically trying to overpower the person in front of them. So how do they do it? They have to learn to trust their moves and their techniques and trust the play for them to move that lineman or move around them. More importantly, it's more about moving around them. So when we get really tense, it causes a lot of issues and we end up overtrying. So we might hear ourselves think, I have to hit targets. Or we push ourselves, I've got to hit this fairway. I've got to hit this green. When you push yourself, you tend to tense up, and the result is a missed target. That is, I see that day in and day out with athletes. I mean, think about this from a standpoint of if it's a pitcher and he gets behind in the count, and all of a sudden he starts muscling and trying to hit the target every time, chances are they're going to throw balls because they're not trusting what they're doing. So what do? Is it possible to find the effort point where we're trying to just try hard enough and not to exceed this amount? Now, I believe it's possible. Okay, I've seen it happen. I even coach athletes through this. But it's not an easy task. I believe that 90% of the competitors in competition are over-trying. And many of them are over-trying the entire competition. Why is that? Well, there's three reasons. And there's three reasons why competitors over-try. Okay? The first is they're afraid to trust their subconscious skill. They're afraid to trust their skill. Many competitors do not train enough properly to really know what their skill set is. Okay? And I see this all the time. Hey, I used to witness it because I used to be purely a technical teacher. And I would teach the technical piece, and then I would send the athletes on their own for them to work on it on their own, hoping that they would perform well. Folks, that's not a good recipe. And I was guilty of it. So when you talk about it now, why are these athletes afraid? They can't even trust their skill. One is because they're not testing it. We're going to get into that here in just a second. They're not testing what they've been taught to execute it and learn to trust and execute it, and then put it in a game type situation and raise the consequences even higher. And we're going to talk about that. So that's the reason they don't trust. The first one is they're afraid to trust their subconscious skill. And here's an interesting piece. They try to compensate for this in competition by being extra careful. All right? They try to compensate for this in competition by being extra careful. All right? So extra careful equals over trying. They don't trust their skill, and in competition, they compensate for this by being extra careful, and extra careful equals over trying. And I see this day in and day out with young athletes coming up because we happen to be so tilted towards the technique. Okay? Many competitors work hard enough in training, but still work extra hard in competition. Many competitors work hard enough in training, but work extra hard in competition. Working hard in competition is over trying. Working hard in competition, it's another piece of over trying. Champions work hard in training, and you know what? They work easy in competition. So here's the key. This is a key take home here. The key is to train at the level that replicates your competition or has higher consequences than your competition. The key is to train at a level that replicates competition or has a higher level of consequences than your competition. And this allows you to learn and trust your skills in stressful situations such as competition. You see, that's really not done in golf. And it's been a big problem. And the reason I made my shift is because it didn't exist. And I see it every day. And, any training less than or not close to the level of competition, your performance suffers. I can just tell you right now. Because I think we can all agree that competition has consequences, right? But how many of you can say that your training has consequences? Now, other sports do it. We see it in the NFL, and we see it in Major League Baseball. We see it in the NBA. We really see it in college sports, especially college basketball. I've had the opportunity to sit in on practice with Coach K, and I can assure you that his training has higher consequences than competition. Okay. I mentioned to you earlier, I have the pleasure to speak with parents and athletes on a weekly basis, and they tell me they're working with their swing coach and they've got everything in line and everything looks good and everything, they're hitting it great and doing all that, and they get in competition and their game suffers. I mean, this is a prime example of why I started looking outside of my sport, right? Because I wasn't finding any of this in my sport. So the first place I went to was the NFL, right? And I hooked up with Coach Bill Parcells, and at that time Sean Payton was his quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. The late Tony Sperano was his defensive line coach, and Mike Zimmer was his defensive coordinator. And Bill and I talked about this on numerous occasions, and I was really frustrated because I didn't know how to train my athletes for stressful situations, high-stakes situations, and preparing for competition. So I stepped outside of my sport, and I started bringing these techniques back into my academy. It changed everything because we started raising the training level higher than the consequences of competition. And so what happened is when they got in competition, people felt easy. So, and then I wasn't satisfied with that. Then I took it to the Olympic level or the Olympic arena to learn how the absolute best in the world think, train, and perform. And over the course of 17 years building this system out, we built EPS, and now we've got 20 plus universities around the United States that are running the system. We've got close to 60 in our onboarding program, and working with the NFL and Major League Baseball. It's pretty cool stuff, and it's changing the face of how these athletes are starting to train because we're teaching them how to think, we're teaching them how to train for competition. That's changing their performance. So I'll ask you, how is your training? Does your training, have higher consequences than competition? At any one time, my training didn't, and that's why I made the change. I mean, I'd like to hear your feedback on that. So here's the second reason why competitors overtry. When you think about outcome instead of running, your process or program or systems, we run programs and systems. A lot of people talk about processes and their process. I think that term gets a little diluted and it loses its value because it's really not defined, it's not measured and timed. When you talk about a program or you talk about a system, I think that's a little bit more clear cut. So why competitors overtry is they're thinking more about outcome instead of running their program or their system to control their thoughts. If you're worried about if you're worried about score, your competition, your last failure, or anything other than running your program or controlling your thoughts of executing, you're thinking about you're thinking about outcome instead of running your program. And anytime you start thinking about these things, performance starts dropping. Here's the thing is you can't think about two things at the same time with your conscious mind. So your focus is pulled away from the execution towards the outcome. If you're not focused on performance, you start thinking outcome, your performance is going to start dropping. When this happens, we immediately almost over try when we start thinking towards outcome. We immediately start trying to change the outcome or meet the outcome instead of letting it happen. Just like I was talking about with the defensive line guys. You know, they go up against these guys, they trust their moves, and whatever that play is and wherever that offensive lineman is coming at them, they're going to counter with the moves and create leverage and trust that the play is going to work out and that they're going to be there. They're not trying to do this. So it's important that, thinking about the system, thinking about the program or the steps that you're running to control your thoughts. Thinking about outcome is over trying. So there we go again. It's another piece that, really starts bringing performance down, and the scores just really start going up like crazy. Athletes ask me all the time, they say, Coach, how can I get better with my mindset, right? And my first reply is, I was like, look, I said, you need to stop thinking and learn to control your thoughts. And they look at me like I have three heads. They're like, Coach, you said I need to stop thinking and learn to control my thoughts? I'm like, yeah. What if you could control your thoughts? What if they were defined? And your thoughts must be defined. They've got to be measured. They've got to be timed in competition. However, this has to be learned in training. This is how you train. So what's interesting is a lot of people will talk about what they do or what needs to be done in competition. From my mindset and my perspective, this is what needs to be done in training. And so therefore, that's how we train our athletes, is we train them to learn to control their thoughts. And before the action, during the action, and after the action, and teach them how to reinforce. So it's critical because, then we've mentioned this in other episodes, and we talk about that self-image, and that self-image starts creeping in because that self-image is going to start pulling you back to where your area of comfort is. But if we don't have the ability to control our thoughts, okay, raise the level of our training, all right, and remove ourselves from thinking about outcome, man, we're in a vicious cycle. And I think the training is in a vicious cycle. I really do. This is the stuff that I learned, in the NFL and the Olympic level. And it's an absolute game changer with these athletes, whether it's, a young athlete, 12, 13, 14 years old, all the way up to 19, 20, 21 in college, all the way to the, professional rankings. Okay. Third and finally, most performers are overtrying because they operate on the misconception that trying harder will produce a greater chance of success. Okay? So is this true? Think about the time you recorded your personal best score. Okay? In either in training or playing or in competition. How hard were you trying? I can think about, the low rounds that I shot that weren't in competition. And I remember playing one time, I played 36 holes in one day and I shot 64. And I was beside myself, and I think about, I didn't think about anything that day. Well, if you know me, it's like when I got in competition, man, my numbers went up. Some days I would have good rounds, but it's really what drove me from competitions because I really couldn't handle the pressure. And more importantly, I couldn't control my thoughts. It wasn't so much that I couldn't handle the pressure, I just couldn't control my thoughts. That led to me talking about all of these things that we're talking about tonight. I mean, you hear athletes say, whoa, well, they play really good. Her personal best or his personal best is this. And I always ask, is that competition? No, that's just playing recreationally. Well, if you're trying to play college sports or even professionally, it's not about recreational rounds, So sometimes players play really well when they don't particularly care, okay, if they don't do well. And, sometimes that can lead to maybe even thinking about that in competition. But if the competition is not an important event, or they just, say they're just playing out for the enjoyment of it, and the pressure is off and the scores get good, right? I mean, that can happen because it just really doesn't mean anything to them from a competition. This competition doesn't mean anything to me. I'm just going to enjoy myself today, and the pressure's off, and I happen to shoot a good score. But that's rarely the case. If your performance in competition suffers compared to training, okay, then you're most likely over trying. If your competition suffers compared to training, most likely you're over trying. A logical solution to this might be care less in competition. I mean, people think that. A logical solution might be this: to care less in competition, saying it's not important how well I do. Honestly, I don't believe that's a good solution, and here's the reason why. To say, it's not important, and I really don't care. It's I suggest that if you care less, we get careless. I mean, bottom line. And which is the complete opposite end of the mental error that we're talking about. I mean, this takes it to a whole different spectrum. So, all of a sudden now you go from caring less to getting careless. Man, that's really not the direction we want to go. So, what do I suggest? I suggest you change what you care about. Okay? And that's what this third topic is really about. Stop caring so much about score. Okay? Your competition and winning, outcome of the shot, outcome of the 9, outcome of the 18, outcome of the event. Whether you're a pitcher, whether you're a batter, any of these outcomes, if you start shifting your mind to, forgetting about the outcome and care more about training for the competition, executing your program so you can control your thoughts. That's what you should be thinking about, is my training for competition, executing my thoughts and controlling my thoughts so that I can control them in competition, and focus on next steps, not the final result. I know it's hard to do, but we have the system that does it. And you can start learning these. Focusing on next steps keeps your mind occupied. It's funny, I heard this quote one time, is that a lot of athletes or a lot of people are focused on the past. And they're always looking in the rear view mirror. But that rear view mirror is really small, and you got to look into it to see what's behind you. And that's why the windshield is so big in front of you, so you can see where you're going and you're focused where you're going. And that's where your focus should be, is in front of you and not behind you. And we look at So many times we think about, what's happened in the past, and, it's just, one of the key things that we work with the athletes on is the reinforcement piece, and to keep your thoughts. So we use a performance journal, what's called a performance analysis, and it keeps the thoughts on track. It keeps the positive thoughts of what they did, what they learned, what solutions they need, why they need these solutions, what area they trained in, why they trained in this area, what they did well, and what their goal statements are. And it's the last thing that they do at the end of their training. Why? Because it's a part of their training that helps them keep their thoughts going in the right direction. I mean, imagine if you don't have that your athlete has all these negative thoughts when they finish training or finish competition or finish qualifying. They don't have any roadblocks to block this and say, hey, let's draw out what you did well today. Let's draw out what you learned. Let's talk about the solutions you need and why you need these solutions. And let's talk about what training needs to happen to put these solutions in place and what level of training you need to work on. And let's talk about what you did well today. And let's talk about your goal statement. Gang, that's a game changer. And they do it at the Olympic level. We implement it, and every one of our athletes does. And it's an absolute game changer. So here's a couple key elements. Your job in competition is to execute the process of performing, not playing golf swing. The job in competition is for you to execute the process of performing. That's it. Not play anything else. Not think about anything else, but think about performing. Okay? Now, your job in training is to isolate and master the steps of performing well. Hence, why your training needs to have higher consequences, and that your focus and your thoughts need to be on performing and controlling your thoughts and thinking about next steps as opposed to outcome and score. Okay? Your job in training is to isolate and master the steps of performing well. And if you successfully execute these steps in competition, your score and winning will take care of itself. It will absolutely take care of itself. But you've got to have these steps in place. Okay? The big challenge that I see is everyone wants to change their outcome. Okay? However, they don't want to change what they're doing to change outcome. And so I have great conversations with people about this all the time, but they're not willing to change their habits and their attitudes towards their training. So they go back to practicing all the things that they're currently working on and even train harder in those, and they expect a different result. They expect a different result. And they think and hope that they're just saying, man, they're hoping that it will change. And parents, hey, I'm here to educate you. I'm here to help you understand this. I'm here to help you help your athletes, help your daughters, help your sons. And coaches, I'm here to help you help your athletes. I've gone through the grill in learning this stuff. And if you'd have asked me, 20 years ago or 15 years ago that this is where I'd be in my coaching right now, and working on the mindset training and performance and working with athletes and teaching them how to think and how to train and changing their performance, I'd say you're crazy. But I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I knew I needed to change. And that's my goal, is to help educate you so that you can make a very sound and realistic decision of, hey, this is the direction that I need to go. We can be really technique sound, but if we're not mindset sound, you're in trouble. That's a fact. And you've got to ask yourself, why do my scores fluctuate the way they do? Why do I shoot 75 one day and it's 85 the next? Or I shoot 73 one day and it's 79 the next, or vice versa. Why do I go out and fire a high number and it's a low number the next? So these are some great things, and I'd like to do just a quick recap on overtrying. So first of all, we want to rework our training, right? So it has higher consequences than the competition. That's number one. Okay. Number two, you want to shift your thoughts to the process of performing and not outcome. The process of just purely performing and not outcome. And remember, that's where your thoughts need to be, is on performing. And number three, we've got to change what we care about. Care about executing, not the outcome or the score or how I finish. All the things that we're talking about right here are the things that you have control of. You have control of reworking your training, and that it has higher consequences. You have control of shifting the thoughts to the process of performing and not outcome. You have control of changing what you care about as opposed to caring about what the score is and what the outcome is. And if we start teaching our kids and our young athletes and even our adult athletes this, your performance is going to change. I know this for fact. And just give it a try. I mean, I've always said, hey, just give it a go, because you don't know what's going to happen. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast as much as I've enjoyed putting it together for you. You can join me every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central for the EPS broadcast. If you know someone that might benefit from the broadcast, hey, pass it along to them. And I'd appreciate that, because we're trying to help as many people as we possibly can. If you're interested in being a part of my private client group, hey, let's have a call. I would be more than happy to have a discovery call with you and what that looks like. We've got an incredible onboarding program that is well underway and producing an unbelievable results with these young athletes. And you can reach me by email at sean@seanhumphreys.com, or you can reach me direct. My number is 972-793-7255. Also, I want to mention is that I'm hosting 3 college golf training camps over the holidays at my training facility in Palm Beach, Florida. I'll have college coaches come in, and these are the coaches that are currently EPS coaches at their universities. They'll be assisting me in this, so you get to hang out and rub elbows, but more importantly, they get to get some eyes on you and meet you. And if you're a potential recruit, could be a good answer for you. But more importantly, if you're looking to kickstart in this think piece, training piece, and performance piece, these camps are a great kickstart. They're 2 days, and we have a great relationship with the hotel with great rates. You can check them out at seanhumphreys.com. Just click on the training, and if you'd like to discuss, give me a ring, and I'd be more than happy to chat with you. Hey, thanks again for joining me tonight. I'll see you next week for another great episode and great broadcast. Have a good week. I'll talk to you soon.